Hey, Quants. Today I'm just going to do a real quick demo of the Quant Alchemy Strategy Optimizer that I just released. I've talked about this in the past. It is something that I built based off of other optimizers I've used in the past, and I just wasn't getting the things that I wanted out of it. And as a result, I decided to build my own and include the features that I wanted. You can see on the screen the optimizer already. I ran it with just a simple demo script, but this surface plot was one of those pieces that I really wanted to get. And so this is just a real quick visualization that I can utilize to see how robust a particular strategy I have is. In this example use case, you can see it is not very robust. So I do not, so let's go ahead and get into it. We've got the Chrome Web Store page here, and it is just the listing. So if you want to find it, you can look at Quant Alchemy Strategy Optimizer. You will see a page like this when you click on it, and this will just allow you to add it to Chrome or remove it from Chrome. I did not build this, or I did not go through the steps to release this to other web extension stores like Firefox. If I get a lot of feedback that that's what people want, then I would probably go ahead and do that. But as it is now, it is just this just for Chrome browsers. And I will note that I'm actually using Helium browser, not Chrome browser here, because it's a Chrome based WebKit browser. You can still use it there. So just because it's deployed for, just because it's released in the Chrome extension store doesn't mean you can't use it for other browsers that allow you to use Chrome extensions. I didn't test this in Edge, but I expect it'll probably work in Edge as well. So this is an example of the surface plot I was mentioning, and this is just an example of one of the strategies that you could potentially test this on. So not going to spend too much time on that. Let's go ahead and just jump into TradingView real quick. I just finished running this for the purposes of this demo, and so this is a simple RSI strategy. It's just a built-in one that TradingView has provided. It's a simple one that allowed me to illustrate some of the use cases here. And so you can see it finished, and you'll see what the best max net profit is, because that is what I was optimizing for. If you look over on the right here, you'll see what values are you optimizing for, and are you looking for a min value on that or a max value on that. So I'm going to go ahead and just dismiss this. And again, just going to open up the strategy itself. This is just the strategy that if you use if you pull down the indicator from TradingView, this is what you'll get. And so the concept here is that I'm going to optimize for oversold and overbought targets. And that is what I've optimized here. And then in this case, it's gone ahead and selected the ones that were identified as the best parameters. While I'm on this screen, the one thing that I wanted to mention, and this is one of the things that kind of pushed me to go ahead and get this out, is you have these other buttons on here. I'll probably change these icons again. I was using some other optimizers that I've seen that have used this concept before, so just want to call out I've seen this before, so you might see other people who've had similar icons on theirs. And so the whole idea is that if, in this case, it's not that big of a deal, but with something like the skeleton key, if you have a ton of settings and you want to save those settings, you can download those, and those will save those to your computer as a JSON file. And then if you want to load them back up into the skeleton key, you can do that with the upload button. I will mention, because one of the reasons I really got back into this, because it's something I used to use quite heavily in the past before I started using templates for saving my strategy settings. TradingView has recently put out a release in the last couple of weeks or a few weeks that was breaking some of the old compatibility of strategies, especially really big things like that uses a ton of different features of TradingView and PineScript with the skeleton key. And so because that backwards compatibility broke, it caused people a lot of pain that didn't have ways to pull up their settings if they never wrote them down. And so this is a way to be able to just save those strategies to your file without having to manually write them down. Even if for some reason in the future this broke, we could potentially put out a code release to fix that and create that mapping. But also, if that didn't occur, you could still just have a reference without needing to save that on a piece of paper or in a notebook somewhere digitally, and you can just keep those settings as well. And then you could probably just tell AI, hey, can you tell me what I need to do to apply these settings? And then it would be able to help you out there. And so I just want to call out those buttons in particular. I probably would make those look more like standard. Now that I'm thinking about it, I wish I would have done it before I did this release, but I'll make those look like standard download and upload icons. So moving over to the strategy optimizer itself, the surface plot was one of the main things that I was going for. And so after it's found those values, I will note I was only using, I wasn't playing with the length. I was only playing with the overbought and oversold values. And so what this is going to look for here is it's looking for those input parameters for what I'm looking for, which is overbought versus oversold. And so based on those two parameters, I would look for the highest target, which in this case, because I'm looking for net profit, it's going to point out the highest net profit values. And what I would like to see is something that was similar to what you saw. And this was a mock example, so this isn't the perfect example, like a real use case example. But what you would see is a hump like this, and you'd want to potentially be in the kind of in the valley on top, not the valley, but on the peak there, but not next to the edge. And so let me see if I can explain this. This strategy is not going to be a very good example for that. What I mean by that is you see this flat surface here. What that means is all the parameters around this flat surface got relatively similar results through the optimization for producing the right net profit. And so if you picked one in the middle here, even if there was some variation in the market and it caused this this strategy to move one way or the other, you would likely still end up getting close to that same max net profit. If, on the other hand, you picked one of these spikes here in the middle and anything in the market changed at all, you're going to end up falling off the cliff and get negative net profit here. And so this highlights one of the things that makes building strategies very difficult. And it also highlights why over optimization can be a problem. A lot of people, when they first start algorithmic trading, will pick the best parameters that they can find. And so they'll sit there and they'll just do a brute force optimization. And so they'll go, in this example, if I was going for overbought, values being between 50 and 100, they'll just go, how does 50 perform? How does 51 perform? How does 52 perform? How does 53 perform? And then just pick that. But the problem is you can find one outlier because it mapped well to the historical data, but it doesn't actually work well in live practice. So hopefully I've explained that well and why I wanted to have this just as a visual cue for me to be able to analyze a strategy that I've ran and get some clue as to how robust this strategy would be. On the other hand, if I was picking some values over here, even though these all produce negative profit, if these were all positive net profit, I would feel very comfortable picking a value over here and expecting that to survive different market conditions. So let's go back to the point about being the point about picking over optimizing strategies and just going 1, 2, 3, 4. And so generally it's going to do the way this is implemented to do a random search. It will also do some different strategies in terms of optimizing. And so the point about this is because it can be very inefficient to try and pick every single value and just do a brute force across everyone. It's essentially a permutation for that value. And so you would end up with n number of permutations, which from an exponential standpoint increases exponentially. And as a result, you end up doing optimizations that will take hours or days, and that can be very inefficient. And so if you've seen some of the strategies, the strategy optimizer that Revan has been working on, he does a brute force method, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that concept other than the scaling issue that I mentioned. And so I don't know if he's been working on anything, but he and I have been talking about working together on some of that. And so I plan, if we continue to work together on that or we end up working together, I plan to implement some of these type of things in there so that the optimizer that he's working on and we partner together on will end up being better as a result and not doing this brute force strategy type of concept. So let's go ahead and when I first click start, so if you first load this, the first thing I'm going to mention is if you don't accept the terms of use, this is just saying, hey, you accept the terms of use for TradingView. This is me kind of covering, trying to cover the bases here, saying you're going to be able to, you understand you're using this and we're doing our best to adhere to TradingView license agreement, user agreements. We're not trying to do anything against what they do. From that standpoint, I believe that their biggest concern is if we're trying to steal data, which we're not trying to do. I don't personally hold some data, but this will persist data for your uses. And so it will be local for you. And I'll get into that in a second. So you have to check this if you want to be able to use it. If you uncheck it, you'll see this kind of like, make sure you go down and click it, disclaimer. And so you just check it and then you'll be able to use the optimizer. I'll also point out in the bottom right, there's documentation here that I've created. So if you don't understand how any of this works, go there. I'm not going to go over every single option that this has because I have done some of that, at least explained some of it in other videos, even though I didn't go over every single option. So from there, we just click Start Optimization. And so when you start optimization, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the strategy that you have on your chart and it's going to pull out those parameters. And then it's going to give you the ability to input what you want to optimize. And so as I mentioned before, I had unchecked length because I was not interested in that, although it was set as the highest priority. So originally when this loaded, nothing was, everything was checked. It had this set up at the top row as that initial priority. And again, so that's going to pick that as the number one priority that it's optimizing for, or value that it's using to optimize. And then you have priority 2 and 3. And so I didn't bother changing that because 2 is still greater than 3. So it still gets the priority that I was trying to hit on. And then for this use case, I said oversold 1 through 49. So that's the lower boundaries of the RSI. And for overbought, this is 50 to 100, which is, again, is the upper boundary of the RSI. So sell low and then, or sell high, buy low on the RSI is the concept. And then this was 650 iterations. And so it was going on a step of 2, which again, instead of going 51, 52, 53, it would had 650 cycles. But you can see by decreasing this, how much that increases the scale of running this. And so let's go ahead and cancel out of that. So after you run, when it runs, you'll see a little screen up there that says don't touch your browser because it's being controlled by the extension. So it's just going to manually go through and run those for you and then give you the output. So back on the chart, there's a heat map. So the heat map is a 2D representation of that chart. I prefer the 3D chart, but they communicate the same information. So you would be looking for hot spots essentially on this heat map. And ideally you'd want like kind of a surface area of aggregated hot spots. So, and that would give you the same view as that peak kind of if you were looking at it like this. So I might have rotated this so it probably doesn't look the exact same as the hotspot. I think this might have been rotated this way or something. And so you're looking at it like this, but that's kind of the view that you're looking at with the heat map. So the next thing that I'm going to mention is the run history. So one of the things that I've seen with the other optimizers is that once you run it, you can save that data to your disk, but maybe how do you get it back in here? You can do an import results or you can download your results and then you can import your results, which you have the ability to do that. But personally, I would like to just keep it in the extension so I can click it and run it. And so that's exactly what we have here. Again, this is using browser memory. So you can use a ton of browser memory doing this if you run a lot of examples. But the whole idea is you can run multiple runs. And then if you want to switch back and forth to see the results of all those different runs, you can just load your results back in without needing to do the whole import download thing, right? And so this is using IndexedDB, which is a browser function, basically a browser feature that's supported in WebKit and WebKit-based browsers, and it basically is like a database that exists in your browser. And so if you're doing a lot of heavy data lifting stuff and keeping it local for users that are using it that way, that is one way to do it. And so that's what I've done here. And so if you want to name this run here, you can change the name as well. So, and then if you just want to clear all that out, one way you could do it is the way that you would do it from any other browser. You go to your application storage under your DevTools area, and you just clear out all your IndexedDB storage. If you, however, is a convenience, and just to give end users control, I have the ability to clear history here. So the other things I'm not going to go into, you have settings here, which you will be able to do controls, do different things for your controls, like doing the walk forward testing, which I've talked about in the past, and I talk about quite a bit on the channel. And the other thing about this that I will mention is because it now has that, it has the surface chart here, and I was talking about the surface areas. It does give you the ability to use a control on that. So hot zone threshold. So you can use this. It's going to look great out here. So if I just enable it so it's lit up, you have this robust plateau selection. And so that's what I was talking about there. So the whole idea of this is to help you zone in on those those kind of platforms, so that you ideally are optimizing towards a more robust area, as opposed to just picking this point and saying, this is the one that I want. And it does that during the walk forward optimization. So again, you'll have stages in walk forward optimization. You'll run an optimization stage, you'll do an out of sample test, and then you'll do another in sample test where you re-optimize your parameters for the in sample test. And while you're doing that, it's trying to prevent you from falling into an area where you would find a local peak. So for example, if this is the area we wanted to end up in this run, it tries to help you find these areas instead of zoning in on this particular area or this particular area. So that's the idea there. That's going to be it for what I'm going to go over now. Again, it's live, so if you like it, please give it a rating, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace, Quants.